Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, I feel like I'm sitting a little short. Maybe I should. Hang on. Do a little camera adjustment. That better? Good morning. So, today, today we're going to dissect a hat. Listen, I wanted to get one of those uh, professional sports hats, the ones with the big, thick puff on them. Um, but honestly, I wasn't willing to spend 40 bucks, 30 bucks on a hat just to cut it apart. So I went to my local thrift store. Actually, I had to go to a couple of them. And I found a couple of hats that had some low profile puff. But I think they'll still work for our project today. I did some advanced dissecting. I hope you don't mind. I cut the front off the hats because, we didn't need the whole hat taking up all this space. Okay, so where do we want to start? Um, I want to show you this one was a structured hat, the kind like the Richardsons that, real stiff. And this one was a dad hat. I think this one was actually stitched after construction. Um, but it's still very firm, and that's what I want to feature today. That's what I want to show. Okay, so here are some things I want to show you about this structured hat. When you buy a hat that already has embroidery on it, um, typically that embroidery is done before the construction of the hat. And what you see inside the inside liner. And this one here is actually missing one lining. And to be stiffer. Hey, Doug. Doug's here. Good morning, Doug. Excuse me. So, um, this one, the buckram, is not as firm as some of what you see. But these hats are typically made, the embroidery is done to the fabric before the construction of the hat. And what you see here is on the inside, all of the seams are lined with this seam tape, right? All of the panel layers are built, right? This one has a bit of a lining, and then of course the fabric on top. And it's designed so you don't see the embroidery, the backside of the embroidery. Good morning, Diane. Diane's in the house. Good morning, Diane. Um, so to go with, oh, and Cindy just popped in. Hello, Cindy. Good morning. And congratulations. For those of you who don't know, Cindy uh, won the People's Choice Award on God, I'm drawing blank. I'm sorry. Cindy, you're going to have to help me out. Tell us what you won. Just write it out. Good morning, Barb. Good morning. Oh, so while Cindy is doing that, um, so the thing I want to point out with this type of situation, Jana, you are absolutely right. When they when they did the embroidery before construction, they were only stitching through. They were only stitching through one, two, three, four very thin layers where we typically have to stitch through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers. That's where our hiccups come into play with the whole bulky seam. Okay, so I took this. Oh, here we go. Cindy said, "Thank you for voting. Sewing machine plus Hoop Fest. Thank you." Hoop Fest, the people's choice, because of all the wonderful people that voted. She had a beautiful dress that she had embroidered. It was beautiful. She is such a sewist. She's not just embroidery. She is a creator of garments. Yeah, I don't have that skill anymore. Okay, so back to this. Um, First of all, the thing I want to tell you is I pulled up a bunch of strings here. I dissected this so you could see the construction of the hat, right? But then and because it's a satin, I was able to come to the back and split the bobbin seam, um, and pull up some of these threads. Now, let's go here. Do, do, do. Do, do, do. Where is it? Do, do, do. Just trying to figure out where I'm going here. Diane, I agree with you 100%. Throughout the voting stages for Hoop Fest, Cindy was actually posting short videos on her construction and her process. Um, that was wonderful. Okay, can I get myself up in here somewhere? There we go. All right, so like I said, I peeled off and pulled away uh, some of the stitches on this bottom half. Um, Cindy, forgive me. Cindy's noticing that this is a Texas Rangers hat. It was one of 3 puff hats that I found at my local thrift shop. Um, Please understand that this hat has been given a new lease on life, even if it is temporary. You know, it's serving an educational purpose. I, I promise I will try to find a different hat later. Okay, so this hat, the foam is actually quite thin. In fact, I took the calipers to it. We can do that here. We're going to turn the calipers on. Oops, on. Then we're going to zero it out, pull it back, and we're just going to measure here. You can see that this foam is only about 1.4 millimeters. Gina, you are so right. Uh, just Cindy, just like a cadaver for the medical students, this hat is to the embroidery students. Okay, so this foam is only about 1.5, 1.4 millimeters, and that's okay. Um, the thing about doing 3D puff is, regardless of how tall your foam is, you could use a 2 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 6 millimeter. My friend Jeff Fuller actually modified his machine to test stitch a 12 millimeter foam. I, it was a bit excessive. Okay, so So this is just a small bit of foam. The one thing you can't see because we're looking at white on white is that the ends here have caps. You know, when you're doing 3D foam, you have caps. No, Doug, I'm pretty sure this is just 1.5 millimeters. Um, when you're doing 3D foam, you need to cap off the ends so that the foam is not exposed. You need to make a bridge between two foam areas that come together. You will have a travel stitch, but I use a 5 millimeter long travel stitch. Um, I use a 5 millimeter travel stitch to take me up to the next bridge, to the next cap, to the next cap. I use a 5 millimeter because it is longer and has fewer penetrations to the foam, therefore, less compression. Okay, so the other thing I did in our dissection of foam, and the whole thing that brought this to me, when you go out in the retail world and when you go out into the retail world and you look at these 3D foam hats, they're very firm, right? The stitching is very, very tight and it's very firm. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I do a 3D foam, sometimes it's not, um, it doesn't seem to be as firm. So I wanted to find out why. Okay. So the other thing to get to that portion, I wanted to know how many stitches, what was the density, what was the thread type. So this part got a little tricky. You're right, Doug. These hats are generally made overseas, and they may not use the same um, base base products that we do. Um, Again, I really think this is a 1.5 millimeter versus a 2. I could go get my 2, but then you're saying it could be compressed, and it could be. But let's just, regardless of the foam, let's find out what the density is. When I when I do a 3D foam, I typically use a .16 density. Okay. Um, yes, Cindy, you are exactly right. Typically, um, these hats, any embroidery work that's going to be done on the hat is done in a flat hooping, in a flat structure, and then they are later brought together in the curve for the hat. Okay, so I cut, and this is going to be hard to see because we're doing white on white. I cut a 1 millimeter swatch of threads. I just measured out 1 millimeter, took my little scissors, and we're going to do that here, and just cut up, brought it over, and cut up, and then I had all these threads. All right. So what did I do with them? Got tricky because they wanted to fray, but I taped them. I taped them. I pulled them apart and I taped them so that I could get a count. In this 1 millimeter piece, I found 22 threads, roughly. As you can see, while I was working with them, some of them frayed quite a bit, some of them untwisted. The next thing I needed to do is I needed to figure out what size thread was being used. So I have 22 threads here in a 1 millimeter space. So I pulled out a 40 millimeter thread. I'm sorry, a 40 weight thread, a 60 weight thread, and a 70 weight thread. The 40 weight thread, as you can see, is probably too heavy. The 70 weight is too light, which led me to believe that this is probably 60 weight thread. You are very welcome, Cindy. Cindy was saying how she's glad that there's somebody out here, myself, that understands the ins and outs of embroidery construction because it helps understanding what's going on. And that's where we are. So I believe this to be 60 weight thread used in the construction of our 3D foam on this hat. Now I did the same kind of thing with the dad hat piece. Um, Same kind of, it came out the same. Uh, it looks like 60 weight thread, and it looks to be fairly dense. Now, now I know I've got 60 weight thread here. I know in a 1 millimeter place, a 1 millimeter swatch, I need to have 22 threads. So how did we do that? How do we figure out that density? Well, if Eric Campbell were here, he would probably just do math. But math is not my friend these days, hasn't been for several years. So what I did, one moment please. Cindy wants to know if 60 weight thread would hold up for that kind of pressure over the foam. And I'm going to have to say yes, because you should have seen this hat when I first bought it. It's pretty beat up. Um, and there was not one pulled thread until I got to it. And you know what? Let's see what the caliper says. I just pulled a length of thread off of this. Let's see if the caliper can give us a measurement. You ready? Yeah, this caliper is not precise enough. Yeah, it's not precise enough. I have a professional caliper, but it's out in the equipment room, and I don't want to ditch you guys for a caliper. But I still, let's see. You know what? It just may be a 40 weight thread. That's okay. We're still going to figure out the density. I'm going to set this aside. We're going to go to we can remove this one, remove from scene. Okay. All right, so what did I do? I made a 1 millimeter satin stitch. Oh, Gina, what are you saying here? the finer threads will blend together smoother than the heavier threads. I agree, Gina. That is, I believe that to be correct. And Cindy is saying that she's never used a 60 weight thread when doing puff. She just uses the 40 weight. Me too. Which is another reason, like I said, I wanted to dissect a commercially made hat. I wanted to dissect a commercially made hat to find out what they're doing different from what we're doing. So I know I need 22 threads. Here's my, let's see if we can increase this some. The one in blue is my typical density of 1.6. And if I go to take the true view off, I can count how many rows of stitching I have, and it's only 7 rows of stitching in 1 millimeter. That's a lot less than our hat. Our hat has 22, and I can't get any closer to this, which is why I made this blow up. Our hat has 22 lines of stitches. So I kept increasing the density until I got, well, in this case, 21 stitches. And that density turns out to be a 0.05. That's really dense. Which makes me think 60 weight thread, 0.05 density will give us a firm stitch out. And I failed, you guys. I just realized I did not do a test piece. I did not do a test piece. I am so sorry. I will do a test piece today, and I will post it in groups so that you can see how it goes. I don't have any 1.5 millimeter foam. Uh, I'll use a 4. It'll still give us the same results. I will use the 60 weight thread, and I will use a 0.05 density and let you know how it goes. Gina, you say you do your shirt monograms with 60 weight. Is that, again, because it gives a finer look to the project, to the stitch out, to the monogram? You know, some of us might need to start considering using something other than, yes, she says, start using something other than 40 weight thread. Yes, it increases the stitch count. And for those of you that are charging by stitch count, uh, others will call that an inflated pricing. Um, so keep that in mind. I I stitch by hoop size. I price by hoop size and by time. So if it's a, if it's a 10-minute stitch out, then I only charge for 10 minutes of time. So while we're here, does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts regarding this 0.05 density using 60 weight thread? Who's going to give it a try with me? I know we all have 3D foam design files out there in our work. So let's just pick one and go. And I promise I won't do the Texas Rangers, Cindy. I promise. I'll do something else. Mm, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I have a client who I've been waiting to get edits for their 3D foam project. I'll use their project. Okay. Well, we have a few more minutes. What do we want to talk about? um, let's see. Cindy, you already have 60 weight thread. Bobbin thread is 60 weight thread. So if you keep a white and black bobbins in stock, you have that. You can use one of those. Um, how do you load it onto the machine? That gets kind of tricky. I use a red solo cup. God, I feel so unprepared today. I use a red solo cup. I punch a hole in the bottom so it'll sit on the thread spool. The puppies are playing off into the side here. And then I punch uh, my 3D Pro Plus tool through it, and then I load the bobbin here, and it'll spin right off. There is a 90 weight bobbin thread out there, but that's typically for the little brother 4x4 machines. They're set up for 90 weight. But the commercial embroidery size L bobbins that you and I buy, those are all 60 weight. So you can do that. Sounds like Doug saying that he did some leather embroidered labels that had 3 millimeter text that he used 60 weight thread with a 65, what would it be? 7511, 7010, 65 9, 65 9 needle. Um, Bonnie Nielsen did that whole class that we were part of at Impressions on doing tiny lettering. Um, yeah, can be beautiful. Okay, so where was I? Oh, yes. I'm going to do a test using the 60 weight and the foam um, next month. God, this month is almost over, isn't it? Next month is Applique Getaway. For those of you, I am going to take my work with me. You're welcome, Gina. Thank you very much for being here. Um, so I am going to take my work with me, though it's going to be kind of sketchy as to how much time I'll have. I'm going down early to visit with a friend, and then I'm going to be staying a couple of days later. But like I said, I'll bring my work with me. If you have any questions, I'll see what I can do about setting up and doing a live. Should we try to do that? A live at Applique Getaway? All right. Well, with all of that in mind, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say I'll be back next week. Um, thank you very much for being here, and uh, have a great week. Enjoy it. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Gina. All right, here we go. Fun? Do you have more questions? Do you want to learn something new? Join me at quicktostitch.com for coffee and conversation, and we'll talk about it. Embroidery machines, designs, and business. Hope to see you soon. Bye now.